Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good ever what time of day it happens to be that you are listening to the Tattooed Teacher podcast. On this episode, I have Emil Zankov. Now, Emil is a digital technologies teacher down in the great state of South Australia. Now, there is so much more to what Emil's doing, and I'm going to let him share, but there's some building digital technology programs taking his students overseas to the VEX Robotic Championships. We'll get into all of that. So, Emil, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, Philip. Great to be on a podcast for the first time, so something a little bit different.
Hey, I'm glad you could be on the Tattooed Teacher podcast for the first time. That's fantastic. Thanks again for doing this. I appreciate your time, especially on a public holiday. To give me an hour of your time is fantastic. So I appreciate that.
Not a problem. I think, as a teacher, we're balancing things here or there. I'll probably talk about barbecue, as you can see back there, and go through a whole bunch of rabbit holes. So, it's nice to sometimes just share perhaps messages and words of advice to not only teachers but to also students and young people to see us perhaps in different lights outside of just the classroom.
Absolutely. Well, surprisingly, I do have a couple of my students from a previous job found me, and they listened to it. They gave me some. They said, "We found your podcast," and I was like, "Well, why are you listening to it?" It's really interesting. We love it. So there are students listening. So which is really good to get a bit of an insight into the teachers don't just live and breathe, and then at 3 o'clock, when they disappear, we just, go into our little caves in the school. So
that's it, exactly.
So you're a digital technologies teacher, you're a dad, and I can see that you're a barbecue aficionado with that giant smoker out the back there, or oven, or I love my little barbecue. I love cooking, doing all that sort of stuff, but that's next level. So I'm going to ask you about that first. So how much barbecuing do you actually do? Or is that like a weekend thing, like you put it on Friday night and you eat it Sunday lunch, or how does it work?
Look, I probably fell in love with barbecuing extensively, and maybe around the same time as my first child was born, and that's now a bit over 10 years ago. And I think it was one of those components where I always grilled, which I think everyone did. But then to barbecue, or as from the States, smoke, that started to really take hold in terms of just watching this momentum come over, and even the Australian cuisine be expanded into all these different cuts of meat. And I love stories, I love history, comes from my dad, and so to hear about why really what we'd consider terrible cuts of meat like brisket became popular, and how they became popular during a period in America started to really hook me into the story. And so obviously that idea of having something sit on a barbecue for a long time and then it become this gorgeous cut of meat captivated me, because we were so used to just grilling something for a couple of minutes and a steak or whatever, and that's great as well, but this whole other side. So anyway, I started to get hooked, and it's interesting. I've been able to weave in some of the technology into it. The story with this thing here, it's called a Komodo Big Joe, but it's a ceramic cooker for all intents and purposes. There was a gentleman who he was a telco employee but had a software background, and he developed this product, Mark Terrell, called a Smart Fire, and it's this little device that blows air into the smoker and then regulates the temperature through a sensor. But it was really interesting for me from a tech side, because he was just homegrown Australian business. And I remember running a conference maybe 5 years back, and we had Mark on a live conference call with the teachers, and we were talking about the data and how he was gathering all these cooks from around Australia. And so, like, to intertwine, I guess, with my area of digital tech, it was interesting to start to talk to kids about, you know, yes, data analytics is a big thing, or understanding, you know, what, I guess, things that they're used to hearing about, census data and sports data and whatever else it might be. But like barbecue data, I was like, oh, this is great. Like I can bring the two passions in. So yeah, no, barbecuing's, yeah, fantastic. It's an outlet. And I think it's one of those things where, yeah, even tech has found its way into something which is very earthly in terms of fire, smoke, air, and now, you know, you're bringing a little bit of tech. So yeah, I think all those types of components, when you think about students and giving them a sense of technology and its reach, that particular example was interesting to share because it really let them understand that with a passion, with a desire in terms of what you're really keen on, smart solutions with technology allow you to explore those areas. And so, yeah, that was cool. And that company is still going, and, you know, it's been great to see that from an Australian side. We invent so many things in technology, right? Like everyone knows about the Wi-Fi story, but yeah, we just bat so high in terms of how smart we are with the people that we've got in this country, with some of the innovative products that they produce. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it's amazing, and that's like I've heard like a guy I worked with, an IT guy I worked with. Yeah, he was telling me about exactly what you were talking about. And you know, to hear the history of it now is awesome. He was just saying, "Oh yeah, I do this and I do that on my phone," and it's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, great." But how good is it? As an educator, you know, we look at the world in a weird way, don't we? You know, we have our hobbies and we have our passions, but then we look, okay, how do we actually bring that into our classroom and show the kids how passionate that we can be about something, but how passionate we are about a subject, that we see it in a whole range of things. So it must be like a real buy-in for some of the students, probably not all of them.
Yeah.
But someone, you know, that age-old question of students, when am I going to use this in my life? And you go, hey, here's some data analytics that you'll use, and you'll actually have a nice meal at the end of it.
Oh, and look, you know, all right, I'll say something when I say it publicly, and then you know, it's that reinforcement of you've got to do it. But I've been talking about, so in this, like in the States, they've got this high school barbecue alliance. And instead of, it's a great group of educators who have put this thing together. And I haven't seen anything quite like it yet here in South Australia anyway. So I've been thinking about, and instead of STEM, they call it STEW. So it's smoking, technology, engineering, and welding, because they fabricate some of the barbecues, right? Yeah. And so I've been planning something to try to trial it at my school. And yeah, you know, when you try to pitch ideas and you think about where you might go, I was talking to some of the students, and, you know, who's got a barbecue? Yeah. Who barbecues? You know, put up the hand, and you start to gather, again, information, data points, and you start to realize, yeah, that intersection between bringing people together, constant movement. The answer isn't, it's not going to be perfect. There's conditions that get thrown in. So, I know we'll talk about robotics, but there's those elements that you can see why a high school barbecue competition would just be so much fun. So I've been talking about it long enough at school, and you kind of get a wry smile sometimes from the teachers and others around. But yeah, like I'd encourage any teacher to explore. So that's what I'm looking at. That's maybe the next venture, and just seeing how we can bring a little bit of that, because those elements of, I love design and tech, obviously, and digital. My role as the president of Data SA really hooks me into a lot of design and tech teachers. And we know that why that area works is so much of like what I just mentioned, movement, constant, sometimes changing environments, conditions that need to be tweaked as you go. Collaboration comes naturally. Teamwork is there. So there's those elements that I think we can take a lot away and try to keep instilling that within our regular class time, because we know it works, right? Like you see these, it's that classic case. I can't remember how many times, and you might have had that experience as well, Philip, where a teacher or a parent or someone connected to a child sees them in one of these environments. My case often is robotics, obviously. Say, oh, I've never seen them like that before. Like it's like, that's a new person. I'm like, well, that's how I always see them. But I think that is that's something that we that comment happens frequently enough that you're doing something that's hitting home. Because if you weren't, I mean, you wouldn't hear it. So
no, that's exactly right. So, Emil, I can hear your passion behind everything you're saying, which is fantastic. And now you've been in education, you're doing all this great stuff. You bring your outside life into the classroom. So there's that passion and that fire there. So what's your why behind it? Why do you do what you do?
Oh, that's a long story. Now in my early 40s, I guess experiences, you're built from your own schooling experiences. And some positive, some negative, and so on. And I think what happened was I'm in this weird window of time in your early 40s where I had a primary school experience which was distinctly not really that much technology, right? In the classroom, we got a computer lab, which was kind of like, whoa. But then we were also in this period of time that computers started to come back into our house. And so the internet, 14.4K modem, which, for any of those young people listening or watching this podcast, that's really slow. It's like 1.2 kilobytes a second. So if they're technically inclined, they'll work that out. And so there was this moment in time where we were seeing things happen quick. And I wrote a big LinkedIn post a little bit about this, that we were in the era that I was building a website on GeoCities at home, serving content to my year 5 mates at the same time that the school, the teachers were like, all right, we're going to teach them how to touch type, or we're going to bring in these games. And so that was normal, right? Because of course they weren't going as quick as we were, but you think about what was happening in the background. And so in high school, that just exacerbated itself, where you had this feeling of whoa, we are doing here, yet we're coming back to a system which is so slow and moving at a snail pace to what we were doing. I was setting up 200-person LAN parties and getting calls from the teachers where are you? It's I'm running a LAN party. What you're doing? What's a LAN party? It's 200 kids all on servers, and we were just pushing, I guess, areas, and that's why I laugh when you're saying we're even with things like bans, etc. It's that it's not about a technological ban, because students will we inherently want to be connected, and we inherently want to chat, and we want to push envelopes. And so it's interesting, like, to come back, the why. The why was because I always felt, in some ways, in parts, probably in the latter part of my schooling, that I was like, there's got to be other ways to grab kids in unique environments that kind of keep pushing this boundary. And the onus on me now as an educator is to stay at that forefront, which is why I love digital tech. It's also, I think it's an exciting, challenging part. Generative AI has 100% exactly, like, moved even quicker. Like, if I was building websites as a 10-year-old and hosting my own site in the 90s, what can students do now with a bit of toolkit support is just, it blows my mind. It makes me excited, but it also makes me conscious of this area and the need for us to stay abreast of it, stay passionate about it, continue to bring in that excitement to students, and help with some of those components around getting them to a stage where they feel that there's a sense of a guide to keep them ticking over. So whatever pathway they go post school, they've had this sense of excitement and enjoyment, and they can just keep going. And I think that's one of the components, versus you leave school and you're like, lucky I'm free. Now I can do all the things I want to do, right? It's like technological prison. It's like, no, you should be growing at that speed at school and then just keep going. Like, that's the bit that sometimes, and I think education, especially over this period of time, 2023 onwards, is grappling with.
Yeah, 100%. And it's one of those things, like, I mean, it's amazing as a 10-year-old you're building websites. Like, I'm just a tad older than you, and I think we got our first computer at school when I was in year 10, I think it was. So, and I remember that, that dreaded dial-up sound, and you're hoping you could get that one photo that your friends sent you, and all that sort of stuff. But you still chose teaching. You had, obviously, especially at that time, it was a real praxis point in society, and a lot of people in that .com era made a ton of money, but you chose education.
Yeah. Yeah, look, it was. So, I mean, like, I think one of the bits for me was finishing high school, and being a bit despondent with it, like the state of education, that experience, that,
Yep.
that small window of the high school experience, going, oh man, doing a diploma in computer science. And again, that was fine, but also in a sense of, even then, the programming languages and the avenues in terms of the tertiary sector catching up was an interesting space. And so I finished this diploma, and Jane, she sadly passed away many years ago. She was the at the front desk, one of the admissions person. She said, all right, what do you want to do? You can go on, keep doing your computer science degree. And I just went, can I use the diploma to get into teaching? She's like, yes, you can. Like, looking at me like, why? I said, I think I'd like to give it a shot, to try to give experiences which, extend to whatever I was able to have, but also perhaps bring some new things in. And she was like, okay. And I just remember this, as like talking about the sliding doors moments. And yeah, it wasn't like, I think my parents always instilled education. My mum's hairdresser from so I was born in Croatia, and just that sense of her two older sisters being like she had top marks in high school, would have been able to go to uni, but they weren't able to afford after sending her two my auntie's oldest sisters to uni. So, but even with that, my mum just like smashed out, running a business, being self-employed, first one in that little town, and just pushing, and always having that importance of what education can bring you and what it can open in terms of the doors that it does. And so for me, it was part of it was like maybe it was a little bit of give back to an era of when I was a student going, like I want to, have that sense of that we can do it differently. But then on the other side now, much more so, it's more along the lines of how many opportunities we can provide young people. And so, I always looked at it from that perspective. Being one of the bits that excites me being involved in things like robotics and so on was the connections outside of your own school. And that's the bit that kind of makes me more passionate, because I spent a bit of time with the department, just shy of 7 years. I worked in some seriously disadvantaged areas, had that sense of what that connection can happen when you're bringing young people into environments that they've never been exposed to. So we take a bus down to a competition, and the kids are looking around going, "Mr. Z, are we in Hogwarts?" I'm like, "No, it's not Hogwarts. It's just a different part of town you might not have been to. It's a big, I know it's a big school." But so, to come back to your original question, why education, why teaching? I think we can, you need that sense of real fulfillment and enjoyment. I've been fortunate in a way. You obviously make your own luck as well, and you have some people, you have people along the way that help you. And then you just got to, you get that nudge and you just keep going. I think that part of it has always been fun for me. And so we hear a lot of stories. I think the teacher workforce survey just came out the other day about, the classic 1 in 5 and, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel terrible because you're in a system that can sometimes outwardly say, you don't want to be a teacher, right? Like, stay away from this. But I think the other flip side is hopefully showing young people, but also those that have, that have that right, I guess, attitude and that sense of excitement that, hey, this is an amazing environment to work in, because every day you're giving potentially that moment or that change in that young person. And you don't know. We often don't know the impact. We know the impact in that moment, which is great. You get those end of year cards and they're beautiful to receive. But it's the 20-year down the track when you bump into someone and you're like, and that person, oh, that was great. And you think, you were a rat bag in class. They're so good. And it was funny. I had that one. It was actually the other day. There was a student, and he was a great kid, but he was, he reminded me of me, a little bit of a rebel child in high school. And he goes, "Oh, my, how you going?" He said, "Oh, second year cybersecurity." I'm like, that is awesome. And he had that cheeky grin, which I remember as a kid in the class. But you can see, So sometimes, to go back to your question, it's the impact, it's the excitement, it's always the ever-changing space, and you just hope that you can have that for as long as your career will let you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because teaching it's a true vocation. I mean, we all know teachers out there who are doing it because, I just want this, I want the 9 to 3, I want the 12 weeks, off a year, and but you see that they don't have that impact and they don't have that connection necessarily with the children in their classrooms. And I think that's really sad for them, that they lose that little bit of teaching. Now, we've all got students that we would rather not have in our classrooms. 100%. I was probably that student for most of my teachers, and I came into teaching late. But again, it's that, how do I help these students, these children, these young men and women as they move through schooling? How do we help them to get to their next level of success? And yeah, you see those kids who are rat bags, and I know, I had one student that I caught up with on LinkedIn, and yeah, he was so just, you didn't want him in your classroom when he was away. It was just like yes, but you know he was also a teenager, but he matured, and he's running his own very, very successful construction business down in Sydney. He's doing all these amazing things, and it's you love seeing those success stories, but because you have that buy-in and that relationship with those students. So yeah, I think we're pretty lucky.
Look, I think it's the sense of there's a big component of young people with what I mean, the access that they can see, the worldly experiences, that some good, some terrible in terms of the devices, etc., that they can have. That sometimes schools that intersect when the brakes are put on hard. I call it the pack away, the pack away assignments, where churn it out, put it in, move on to the next one, move on to the next one, move on to the next one, and so on, so on, so on. And so I think we do that from a sense of fear, perhaps with some of those students that, you're experiencing that. We just got to keep this thing going, right? And whereas sometimes and this is where the beauty of design and tech and even those digital tech projects, it's almost like you slow down. If you're building a table, if you're welding up a barbecue, if you're putting a web application together, all these things that you're putting a robot together for a competition, it's going to take you 6 months. There's that sense of education being at a pace and with the right element of what you're doing to have a lot of students kind of experience what they might experience when they leave school, working towards something intrinsically, iterating, constantly having a sense of reflection, sharing. Those elements, I can see why, because of the access that students have outside of school now versus my dad and, even your parents and whoever, their experiences, which was, I'm going to school because this is the most exciting place, or I can see things or hear things from the teacher or have experiences that I just can't have at home, or I don't have access to those things like a TV or, whatever it might be, or learning something. So that crash has happened. We know it's happened. And so what are schools, what's education bringing to the table to ensure that those experiences then exist and grow from the student saying I want to be here because these components are I can't do outside of school. And so times are moving very quickly in that direction. I think this is where sometimes, we have those struggles and perhaps, behavior or, something, whereas, like I said to you before, I get those stories it's like a different kid. What'd you do? I didn't do anything. I put them in an environment. It's slightly different. And you get it too, right? You understand that certain constraints are there. I'm not saying that they're not there. It'd be silly. 15 years in teaching, I understand that they exist. But it's that furthering that balance of intersections within those assessments, within the experiences, and that what I, from my days with High Tech High, the project tuning, like being able to constantly ask hard on content, soft on people, what are we asking of students? And then from a teacher perspective, the excitement of crafting assessments. I think I was talking to this about this with someone else the other day. That feels like to me a little bit sadly lost. Like I still have that. I still get that excitement when I, work with colleagues, and there's that sense of excitement when we're crafting a new learning experience. And sometimes in areas where it's given, or, here it is, or quick, we've just got to keep going because there's some scope and sequence we've got to put together, all those things. You want to scream and go like, hey, like remember when you were at uni and you had a little bit of that downtime and you got to like craft a fake assignment that you might put in a prac or you might not, and that little bit of buzz about like, oh, what would this be like for the students? And how good would this? Well, you can do that because you've literally got the kids, but we've forgotten sometimes a little bit of that joy and excitement, seen almost like a burden. And whilst I use a lot of generative AI tools in my practice, in that world of software development, there's that component of bringing the human in the loop when you're crafting those experiences, and then having the machine do a bit of the grunt stuff that you might have, but not losing yourself in terms of how fun it is to put something together. It's you want to bring back the food link. It's a bit like when I'm going through and I'm, you're experimenting on a brisket rub, or you're doing something like it's, that side of it is fun and enjoyable, the pre-prep, and that's what it should be. So
yeah, because there's that part of building something and doing something like, we talk about you're making your rub for your brisket, because you're there and you're going, this is going to be fantastic and this is going to be great, and then you do it and you go, oh, that tastes terrible. What is that? There's too much pepper, there's not enough this, there's whatever it might be. But you go, you know what? Next time I'm going to do this. And I think so much of education has been, we've just compressed so much into our content that has to be delivered. And then, it's the students go, well, I've got to get the best marks. So how do I do that? What do I need to know? So they've lost that journey of almost learning, the experience of learning, and learning how to learn to get a good outcome. And also I remember it wasn't a big issue if something didn't work out. Like, yeah, you wanted, I didn't care about marks because that was just the type of kid I was. I just was there. School was a social experiment. So, and I thank my parents for the patience that they gave me. But there's that experience of being in an environment safe enough to fail, to go, hey, it didn't work. So, which leads me sort of to that thing. So you're with Vex Robotics now. I've tinkered just a little bit with Vex. I've had one school had a little one, and I was just starting to play with it. But I've seen the videos online and how big this can be. So as a teacher, how you've got so much on you already, where do you find that space, or how do you find that space, and keep your passion and do all that sort of stuff in your world? Like we'll just separate the students that you you do this with, but how do you actually find that? Because so many teachers are just absolutely just cooked from just the day to day of education.
They're smoked. They're on like a brisket. No, look, great point, Phil. Because I think one of the bits as well comes back to connection. When you've got when students see you in a different light, or they've got a different experience outside of when you teach them for that 45 minutes or that double for 90, it helps you in that regular class so much. And so what I mean by that is, when I've had students, so the journey of me in this field of robotics started, so pre-Vex, I was in the department and working, and I had this wonderful mentor, and he's sadly gone now, Dean Clark, and he said to me, we're starting up this new school far north of Adelaide, lowest socioeconomic area at the time. I'm going to get some robotic kits. I was like, I've never taught robotics. Doesn't matter. Like, they're coming to you here. And I was thinking, okay. So at the time, it was the Lego kits. And I remember these kits getting delivered. And we had kids that just, super poor part of Adelaide. And so these kids come in, and these kids, they've never even had Lego, experienced that space or this area. And so I remember saying, okay, what else can we do outside of the classroom in this area? And that's when I learned about First Lego League and that competition. And it was interesting because the comments around, where, the time and that stretch. So it just started off very small, but I could see very quickly that the students that were involved, and I just offered it after school. And I said, for half an hour, 45 minutes, I'm still around anyway. I'm still doing bits and pieces, we're gonna be on this journey together. Let's do this thing. But it was the experiences so the competitive robotics side of things, and like you just said before, had nothing to do with grades. It had nothing to do with a mark or anything like that. So it's like you're in there, you're building something, you're standing, you're sitting, and I can't re-emphasize that enough. You're solving problems, and then all of a sudden, in the weeks later on, I'm seeing that same student different, like the interaction's different with me in the classroom. It's changed, because whilst they're like, okay, got to get through this content, here, Mr. Z's telling me, but they've got this other bit kind of, perhaps, they're looking forward to it, but they're making correlation. They're making links in terms of where they're outletting this knowledge that they're learning. And so those experiences were starting to show me that this field of competitive robotics was actually, you want to take the word competitive out, it was this community starting to build these. And so when Vex set up in Australia officially in headquarters, like any digital technology teacher, and this is the bit around time, etc., we were looking at environments of engagement with even our older kids and all the way down to our receptions. And so I was introduced to the Vex platform, and I know there's a lot of platforms, and like I always say, you pick what's right for you, and there's lots of different toolkits that you can use in the space of digital and design. Like I use microbits. We've obviously got the whole world of 3D printing and so on, but this world of robotics and the idea of metal, right, which was really cool in those year 8s and 9s and above, and this other kit which was platform agnostic. And so we've got Chromebooks, and I do a lot in that space of Google, and we've got iPads and Mac and Windows. So I needed a platform that could go across. And then not to get too technical, but the language support was amazing straight off the bat. So then to come back to that time factor again, it really started off with this sense of I wasn't juicing my time in terms of the, I was doing obviously quick introduction lessons in the space for the kids after school, like who wants to, do this Vex thing and, a bit of troubleshooting, but then kept reinforcing that, Billy, you've got a problem. Oh, let me come over here to Sam, because I showed Sam last session and I reckon he'll be able to show you. And then all of a sudden we know that peer-to-peer, they just speak differently to each other. They can relate because it's, oh, you're a kid, I'm a kid. I know you've gone through the struggles, even though they know that the adult has, but we're an adult, right? We're in the other space. Oh, yeah. Okay. Deliver that information to me in that speak. And so for teachers, what I'd say to them is, it's not about having something on your plate, which is going to be like an additional teaching load. It's about having something on your plate that is going to flourish your in-class connections and relationships. And what teacher, especially maths or science, hasn't said, this is really important if you want to become an engineer, or this is really important if you want to do this. And the kid's looking up at them going, yeah, but that's like 15 years away. If I study, pass, pay all my hex debts, don't, it's so far in the blue sky thinking. But with this stuff, it's like right there. It's like, you are an engineer. See that 10-year-old? You're an engineer. And so there's that component of, it's not the workload. Don't consider it as an additional teaching load. Consider it as setting the plantations, the seeds, so that there's these experiences. And I find myself now really at this point where you're more like, and I put a screenshot of an email from one of the teams the other day on LinkedIn, and the way they wrote, like, pleading to open up in the holidays and when can we have our session and all this type of stuff. But it's that component of, like, and a couple of those kids are perhaps, not, like every student, sometimes don't find the connections at school, but I know the more that they have those experiences, it will help, like, for their maths teacher, for their English teacher, for their science teacher, for whatever other subject. We're doing work like I'm talking about educators in that space of, in this area, competitive robotics, laying foundations to help. So we're hopefully providing, we're a team, right? We're all teachers are a team in school to provide that student goes, yeah, okay, I can see I better learn how to write this stuff down because I've got my engineering notebook that I've got to do later on for the thing that I'm really keen on. And it's, that's the nature. Like, you can't be upset as a teacher because student A is not in love with what you're delivering, right? It's just the nature of people. However, we can all help each other to help see where perhaps that learning content experience might be important. So we're all doing a little bit. So energy-wise, I get, because I'm seeing the output of what happens to those students beyond, like, the enjoyment of actually being in the program. That's almost, it almost becomes secondary. And there's even the rubrics are really interesting. So I'll share these with you later, but the engineering and team interview rubrics that students go through this program. So we have industry people when we can give up their time for a day to look at the robots and interview teams. And what's interesting is part of the RECF, so that's the Robotics Education Competition Foundation, that's the non-for-profit arm that establishes the rules, etc., for this season's game. Those rubrics aren't handed back to students. They're just for the judges and for the judge advisor. I don't even see them as one of, as someone that sets up the competitions. And, we don't have students ever screaming out for those rubrics to be handed back, because what ultimately does happen is throughout the season, I've seen kids as young as 11. Now, tell me where this would happen in normal schooling. This happened the other day. This little 11-year-old girl comes up to me. Hey, Mr. Zankov, I've printed off the engineering notebook rubric and we're just having a look through it to make sure we add all the bits and pieces. And I was just like, I was like, what? Inside, I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. I go, that's great. She goes, yeah, we're going to see what we get. Anyway, off she goes. I'm thinking to myself, that's great, because it's intrinsically, she's looking to what not to include. Not what happens now, where not often, but it's inherent in terms of ATARs coming up, this. It's like a gamification, and you're trying to work out what sentence to include, and that goes up by 0.5 on this, and like it's like the Matrix meme, where you're looking at all the things. And so, yeah, enjoyment of learning, what you were saying before, for learning's sake, having that enjoyment to do something because you just love it. And that's why, and probably might not shock you, but I love drama in primary school. Like, I was in all the performance. I love that stuff, just because we had this, you had to rehearse and you had these lines and you knew there was a performance at the end of it, and, you were going to be on stage. And that's the thing. They're building machines, they're building these robots not because, okay, of course they'd like to do well, but the moment that it doesn't work, the moment that it messes up and they've bottomed out, right, in terms of the rankings, some educators will tell you, oh, yeah, like if only you got rid of the scoring or whatever. The scoring, the kids put aside to themselves. You know what they do the moment that happens? They're already thinking about, we've got to fix that drivetrain, we're going to iterate this, what's the pneumatic system, how come our auto code failed? What's the all, like, that's the, and so when you see that, you don't have, you're seeing a real experience from the basis of, very different. And you might have been in the same boat as me, as the teacher's handing out, the grades back from a thing. You're just like, oh man, here we go. but you got the mark right. And instead of like looking at your C plus or minus or whatever, where I was, it wasn't like you were so, the experiences leading up, you didn't go back. You know how the teacher say, oh, I want you now to reflect on your mark and, catch you later. We'll see you next time. And teachers know that now, because I can't tell you how many times, nothing worse when you've handed back the test. You see them back on the table after class.
The lesson goes, they walk out, they leave. It sounds...
That was a long-winded answer, but I think hopefully
I love it, and it sounds like there's like some key things I picked up there. One, that you don't see it as an effort; you see it as planning, as foundations, because it's going to help you and your colleagues. You're tricking these kids into learning, because all of a sudden they get excited about something, and then they start to go, well, if I do it in this, then it actually correlates to that, and then all of a sudden you've changed, and quite possibly sometimes you change the trajectory of these students' lives, because they've caught this little spark, and you're just fanning those flames. But and you talk about, it is competitive robotics, but you sort of threw that away and sort of like a community of robotics. And so when you went to the World Championships with your students, and I watched one of these online one of the YouTube videos from Vex, and they were showing a competition, and one team their robot just broke and they were a mess. These were younger kids, and they were devastated. But another team who was already out of the competition, they were straight over and they were helping them, and they were going, "Hey, how can we help? What do you need? We've got spare parts if you want it," and all this sort of stuff. And so when you got to your competition, and you mentioned just before we started recording, you won or a student won the sportsmanship award. Now, in a competition, and for those who don't know, like, this is massive. Like, this is a huge worldwide competition. How did it feel to actually get that? Like, what was it like within that community of the Vex competition? And then what did it to win the sportsmanship?
Yeah, it's such a long journey, because it was so interesting when it started for us in 2018. That was the first year that we started in Vex. That's the first year that it officially started in South Australia. So we've been in this competition since the beginning. And I'll shout out to a team in a second, but the story goes from, and this particular team that won a judged award at Worlds, they started with me in year 6. And so 6 years later, they're in year 12. But it was so interesting seeing them in middle school. And they were a group of mates who were actually spread across multiple teams. And to give the numbers really quickly, so you're talking about local competitions that might have 100 students, 80 to 100 students competing in a small hall, small double room sometimes, or an area of the school. And then that will go to a state championships where it's 300 students, again, across different divisions. And that will go to an Australian nationals, which will be 1,300 students. But the bit that was interesting was seeing these kids. I had no idea that they would make it to Worlds when they were in middle school, of course. And it wasn't even part of that. But it was almost like not letting them know where they could go, but not kind of like, the Roald Dahl's Matilda, the trudge will, like, you will get. No, it was just enjoy, have fun. If it doesn't work. And I remember they'd have these devastating moments. Oh, didn't work, etc. And so on. So once they got to the metal robots, what they call the V5 robots, I distinctly remember this moment they were in year 10. This particular team, because we actually had a middle school team go through, and that's a whole different story. I'll just finish with this one. And they bottomed out hard, Philip. Like, they second to last at the Australian Nationals. They did reasonable in local comps, reasonable to get through states, and at nationals it just like. And I remember the team captain, he came to me, he's like, "Mr. C, it's so bad. Like, I apologise." I'm like, "What are you apologising for? You guys did so good to get here to the Australian Nationals. Like, we do this, all teachers." And they're like, "Oh no, we're coming back." I'm like, "That's all right. Like, good, see what happens." Anyway, they come back over the next season because the fields change every year. It's season by season, the whole challenge changes. And I saw team changes, and they came in like a business. They were like, "Mr. Z, so we've made some team changes. Some team members are like, we're going to be more efficient." I'm like, "Oh, okay, like, see how you go." I'm still like, whatever. And then all of a sudden, they lock in, right? And they lock in so hard that I was almost, talk about the time. They're knocking on we need this part ordered. Okay, Mr. Z, we've checked. I think you've still got budget. They knew my budget's better than I knew my budget, right? But it was like seeing this group of like friends. Anyway, so they go through and they made it to the Worlds that year. And now here's the interesting thing. So from the Australian nationals, once you get to Worlds, those teams, it's just like 50 steps up. So we make it to Worlds and I'm like, oh, you guys did so good, congrats. And they're like, all right, what happens at Worlds? They got crushed because the strategies don't fly the same way from the Australian nationals to Worlds. It's like the designs, etc., how they drive. It's all these bits and pieces, you know. Like half the time, it's funny as a team coach, people would think you know the competition inside out. No, you know where to order the parts. Sit back. I couldn't build these robots, and we're talking an engineering notebook of 300 pages, Philip. So the season starts in April every year, and then it goes through to the Australian Nationals in December. By the time Worlds is, so it's in April again, because it's an American school window, but it works pretty well for Australia. They're on 300 pages. This engineering notebook is just like I'm looking at this thing going, I've given it to engineers, and they've gone, our interns don't write like this, right? This is just amazing. So they get, boom. All right, we fly back. And I'm like, how good was that? They're like, I'm thinking, all right. They ramp it up another notch. I'm tired just thinking about it. And so they ramp it up another notch and they make Worlds again. And this time, you know, they do really well. They get 5 and 5, so 5 loss, 5 wins in their division, and it's a team award, the sportsmanship award, which encompasses a whole range of things and interviews with judges and so on. But it was, you know, what's interesting is you leverage off this team. And I just saw the team captain on LinkedIn. He's on LinkedIn now, of course, out of uni, Haranya. I'll tag him in this because you know, he'll come back and go, anyone else, mate? I'm like, as in, you know, he's pretty happy with himself. But I've said to him, I go, mate, for a lot of South Australian teams, for a lot of Australian teams, what we do out of this is we just give that sense of vision and celebration to other teams, the journey, the story. I talk about we talk about the failures a lot more than the successes, but also the how you get there. And so for me, those kids, it's so empowering. We know this works when young people see other young people going through and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We know as teachers, it's hard for us to deliver that. No matter, like as a dad, you know, dad saying, you have those arguments with kids and you sometimes say, oh, you know, I was 10 once too. It's like, no, you weren't. You don't know what I'm going through. It's like, I kind of do. But so bringing that in, the idea of competitive robotics is you have at your feet on the platter an ability to provide contextual experiences to other students and say, see that group there? They're also iterating, changing, and they've gone through many phases. See that group? And it's like kids starting to see that journey together. And so when we talk about breaking the walls of not only socioeconomic conditions, because we have now a situation that students from other schools, from all walks of life, who would never cross over in schooling times, they now know each other as mates, as friendly competitors, as colleagues. They're sharing things on social media in terms of designs and iterations and chatting about when they're catching up next at the competitions and all these bits and pieces. So you're building this environment, this ecosystem. And I think for me, that's the most important part of all of this, the environment that is developed, the goodwill, the excitement, because that's the bit that's going to, I think, for these students after high school, it's going to stick with them for a long time, and it's going to take them into a whole range of areas. And you know, I'd like to think sometimes they don't even realise the impact it's having on them till much later.
Yeah. I think that's 100% the case. They won't realise the opportunity and the experience that they were a part of until they're older, but that's part of life, isn't it? You know, you the older we get, we go, oh, I wish I had of, or I'm so glad I didn't, or remember when. There's all those things that it takes maturity and takes experience.
Yeah.
And then you go, wow, what, Mr. Z, he took us to the US, and yeah, we didn't win anything, but man, what an experience we had.
Yeah.
We learned how to do a whole range of things.
And I just want to perhaps, an important point around this is, and hopefully, people listen this far in, but so sure, I did things, we set up things after school, but I know my colleagues around the state in different schools, all sectors. So I know a couple of great mates out that are doing lunchtime classes. And so they've arranged, as an example, in their department school that, hey, we won't do, like, if you can, instead of for yard duty, we'll open up that robotics lab and we'll have all these kids come in and do this at lunch. And, these kids just go in and they have, they work and they have the best time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it doesn't cost them a lot outside of school time, and there's ways to do this in an environment, like I said, the reward benefit of what these kids will then bring to you in your regular class is very much underrated. And so I think, there's definitely that whole spread of being able to engage in different ways, and hopefully it doesn't put people off thinking, oh, I could give this a go, because there's teachers out there, and trust me, coaches, they have no background in digital, no background in robotics, no background in the design. They've started up these clubs, and they're like, these kids are just doing their thing. I'm there as a supervising body. I'm like, I know. Tell me about it. Like, how good?
Oh, that's awesome. Mate, Emil, I absolutely love your passion, and like it comes across, one, not only in the way you think and what you do, but also just I love how that first and foremost it's about building the relationship with the kids for their best interest, and you're reaping the benefits of that. And I think it's great to hear such excitement about education, because we know we hear plenty of negative stuff, and it's so great to just to hear what you're doing and what Data South Australia are doing, and Data in most of our states as well. So it's amazing. If people want to find out more about you, about what you do, maybe even Vex Robotics, they want to talk to you about that. What's the best way that we can put in the show notes for them to get in contact with you? I mean, I know we met through LinkedIn.
Yep. So, so obviously LinkedIn is probably my primary social media now. There's, if you're in South Australia, Data SA, so data.sa.edu.au, great tech non-for-profit teaching association I'm current president of. In terms of Vex Robotics, that's an easy one. It's vexrobotics.com, and that whole team, they ship out of Adelaide, and I'm a volunteer that runs competitions for Vex Robotics. I'm I'm just, I guess, you'd say, like a lot of teachers, happy to help others who are on that journey in that space. In terms of contact with the competitions in South Australia, the Robotics Education Competition Foundation, they have an Australian branch here, and then I guess I'll shout out now, and we'll put it into the notes. The state championships in South Australia are going to be held at UniSA Mawson Lakes, or soon to be Adelaide University, on November the 10th. And that's totally open to spectators to come in. Myself and colleagues will be putting that on. And then the Australian Nationals in Vex Robotics this year are held in Adelaide. Last year they were in Sydney at Randwick. Yep. And then they try to move around. So we see a lot of the country, but in Adelaide this year on December the 6th and 7th, and they'll be fantastic. Again, a huge celebration. And I think it's one of those things where it's about robots, but it's not about robots. It's about so much more. It's so either of those means. Data SA, you hit me up on an email there, president at Data and LinkedIn. So I'm always happy to chat around any of these things. And barbecue. If you got questions on barbecue, smoking.
We'll hit you up as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. Now, look, it wouldn't be the Tattoo Teacher podcast if I didn't ask you, Emil, do you have any tattoos?
I don't have any tattoos. I don't, but you never know. Like I'm young. I'm young at heart, and you never know. You never know. Maybe get a lot of the students actually. When they made Wells trip, there was this like small window. Like, come on, Mr. Z, if we win it, just get our team number on that. It didn't happen, but it was close. It was close.
That's brilliant. Nothing like a good G up from students.
Yeah, that was good.
Well, Emil, I appreciate your time, especially on this public holiday, which is going to date when I post this. But thanks for your time. Thanks for your passion. Thanks for the joy that you bring into education and just what you share with your colleagues, us outside of your school, but most importantly, the joy and the passion that you share with your students.
Thanks, Philip. Appreciate the time. Enjoy the break as well, and good luck for term 4 to all the teachers out there. It's a quick term, celebration at the end of it, and good luck to everyone. And look forward to touching base. I'm sure in the near future.
Absolutely. Well, Emil, again, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you and all you're doing.
Thanks, Philip.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. If you like what you heard, it would mean so much to me if you could either like, follow, and subscribe to whatever platform you are listening on. The music was by DJ Fruit Salad. Thanks again for listening. Stay cool. Be blessed.